let's say we could let's pretend we're talking to a listener who's I'm going to go out, I'm going to look for Bigfoot tracks. What's some advice you could give to that listener that'd be really like solid takeaways of what they need to look for or what they might not want to do that they would do by accident, things like that? Anything that you could
I think a lot of it has to do with defining your expectations. It's why do you want to find tracks? So if you're looking for tracks because you want to document something definitive
Okay.
to be proffered for the approval of other people, now you're up for a really difficult task. Because you could say, let's look at, I've got a number of casts here, they're all replica casts. I have, I don't know how many pounds of dental stone and plaster for casting tracks that has been in my kit with me everywhere I've gone since 2005. That's how many tracks I've cast
Wow,
ever.
okay.
0. But it's still
Wow,
there.
yeah.
I still take it with
Yeah.
me. I have seen what I think were legitimate tracks in the
Okay.
field on a handful of occasions, but they certainly weren't of the resolution or clarity that would be convincing. So again, if you take like the most detailed, best tracks that we're aware of, and you realize that there's degrees of quality, and these are the highest quality ones documented yet, and yet they haven't done anything really to move the needle towards definitive proof that anything of equal clarity or quality, let's say, or lesser, certainly won't have that impact. If you were looking to document tracks in order to sway or to gain some kind of acceptance, whether that's scientific or academic acceptance, the bar is pretty high.
Okay.
Now, if you're just trying to validate that there are Sasquatches in the area that you're interested in looking into, then certainly that's where it gets tricky, though, because there is ambiguity in animal tracks. The Appalachia is a good example. Area X and the Ouachitas is a great example. And that's the rockiest place I've been, easily east of the Rockies, but one of the rockiest places I've ever been. So there's very few places that would even retain a track. So the place is loaded with bears, and we've seen bears with our own eyes and gotten lots of pictures of them on camera. But it's very rare that you would find a bear track of the kind of quality that you could photograph or cast and that anybody would go, man, that's a bear track. Everything else would be like a roughly bear paw shaped divot. So any animal can have tracks to that degree. The Sasquatch is no different. So I think that's the difficult thing, is that there's also this sort of frequency illusion that happens, where, let's say if you got a new, I don't know, pick a car out of a hat, a Jeep Cherokee. All of a sudden, you notice on the interstate and in the grocery store parking lot and the mall or wherever you go.
Jeep Cherokee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you might think to yourself, wow, there's really, all of a sudden, these are everywhere. They were always there, but you weren't looking. Well, when you start looking for a roughly foot-shaped divot in the ground, you're going to find them everywhere, because such is the substrate of most of North America. And so I think that's where a lot of people run into problems as well. So I would say, if I was prompting someone, like, here's what you should look for, if you could find one or more tracks, at least one, whether it's a clear track or whatever it is that you think is a track, and you could suss out to the best of your ability which end would represent the heel and which end would represent the ball or where the toes of the foot are. The next track has to be somewhere within reason from that. And a lot of people will use, let's say, a tracking stick. It's a lot easier to do on humans than the hypothetical Sasquatch, because the human step length is shorter. But essentially, if you have a long enough stick, a tracking stick's basically, you have two rubber O-rings. I wish I had a representation of it. So you'd have two rubber O-rings on, let's say, a 6-foot long stick. And if I find your footprint, I wish I had something to demonstrate this with, but essentially I would lay the tracking stick down on your footprint and roll one O-ring down. Well, especially it works better if, let's say, if I can see both your feet.
Makes sense.
I put the bottom of the stick at your back heel, and then where your front heel strikes, I roll up one of those rubber O-rings there, and then potentially the other rubber O-ring to your toe.
Gotcha.
And so then I can take the stick to your front foot, and somewhere where those O-rings are, there should be the next track.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there'll be variation if you run or if you slow down, like those step lengths will change. If you're seeing just one divot in the ground and you cannot find a subsequent impression, then that's probably not a footprint, because these things, if they exist, certainly obey the laws of physics and therefore would leave multiple tracks. And so that's a good way to talk yourself out of proclaiming that something's a Sasquatch track when it's not. And I see a lot of those online. One thing that's odd to me is that, for whatever reason, Anything that's roughly foot-shaped, people will assume is a track, including, like, a void of grass. You'll have a grassy area, and then there's a grassless brown, roughly rectangular, and they'll be like, "There's the track," and I'm like, "Did the Sasquatch foot just
You're like,
rip?
"I don't know."
Is it like a Velcro foot that just tears all the grass out with it?" And so, like, the
Yeah,
grass is
right.
everywhere, but for some reason, when it stepped there, it just removed the entire top layer of grass.
That
But it's a pitfall, right? It's the same thing. I don't put any stock into stick structures. I've never
okay.
seen any structures that I thought had to have made. I take that back. The one structure I've seen that I knew had to be made by hand, we did figure out that it was one of the property owners who was making it,
Oh, really? Wow.
specifically trying to get
Okay.
the other property the other person that lived on the property invested, emotionally, invested in this thing. But
Way. Oh,
but it's that
man.
frequency
Wow.
illusion. If you go out looking for what you deem to be patterns, you will
Mhm.
find them
Oh,
everywhere.
sure, yeah.
And you can go to a city park, a municipal park in a city limits where there's not a single animal bigger than a squirrel, and you will find those same breaks and twists, or not twists, but like X formations,
Oh,
assemblages,
yeah.
etc.
Yeah. And I've been to a summer camp before as a, junior hire, and they would have an outdoor skills week, and they would have the kids make stick structures, and they were so good that it would have fooled some Bigfoot researchers, but it is what it is. Everyone's got their kinda different view, of things as